Hi, it's Chris from SideFX. Welcome to HEX, episode 6. First up, I talk with the artists from Tendril Studios about their work for the watchmaker Hublot. Then Robert McGee speaks with Vero from Varomix. As part of the Houdini HIVE GameDev, we're hosting a workshop on Houdini Digital Assets for GameDev. We'll speak with Robert McGee, Simon Verstraete, and Ubisoft's Erwin Himes about that. Then Simon Verstraete speaks with Junichiro Horikawa about his work with Houdini and Unreal Engine 5. Then Fiona Wong speaks with Mark Elendt, the rendering lead from the SideFX R&D team. And finally, Debra Isaac speaks with CG artist Teinye Cliscent Horsfall. It's going to be a great episode. Let's jump in. Hey, it's Chris from SideFX, and I'm here with the guys from Tendril Studios. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Chris. Good to see you.
You too. So let's start with a little intro on yourselves. Chris?
I'm Chris, one of the co-founders of Tendril here in Toronto, and day-to-day working as a creative director at the studio.
Hey, I'm Vitali Grossman, designer and director based in Hamburg, Germany, and working for Tendril since, I feel like almost 3 years, right?
Hi, my name is Filip Pavlov, and I'm a CG generalist based in Moscow, Russia. And I have been working with Tendril also around 3 years.
Very cool. So let's talk today about the spot for Hublot. Beautiful, beautiful project, by the way. How did that come about?
They reached out to us directly about a year ago, and we started talking about the possibility of working together. They had seen some of our work for AutoStore and really liked it. And just called us directly, and we picked up the phone.
Mm-hmm. So, what was the creative process? What was the brief, and how did you address it?
The brief was really cool, and this company Hublot is really interesting in the watchmaking world, in the sense that they're super high tech. When you think of Swiss watchmaking, you think of all the craftsmanship and the hand fabrication work. And what's cool about Hublot that really inspired us, and that was part of the brief, was their material science division. They basically invent new materials and then figure out ways to shape them into the parts of these various watches. And the brief for us on this project was something pretty special. It was the first time that they had made a watch entirely out of lab-grown sapphire crystal. So the brief for us was to try to tell the story of how this remarkable object comes into being.
Maybe take us through the film.
Vitali, would you like to pick up on how we approached the story beats and the story blocking?
Yeah, sure. So for us, we kind of split the whole piece in like 3 separate major story beats, which was like first part is talking about the material, how the material becomes the sapphire. Then the second part was showing close-up of all the details of the little case objects, elements. And at the end, of course, as usual, the beauty shots and of the watch and the mechanic inside of it. And tried to get some spice and really nice, beautiful images in between to break it up a little bit and to create like a nice, beautiful flow that combines all 3 major story beats.
So let's talk about some of the ways that Houdini was used in this.
We have in working together over the past few years, we've really leaned into the early stages of the project where we do a lot of R&D and visual discovery. So the first, I would say, would you say, Vitali, maybe it was like 2 or even 3 weeks of the project was basically like a purely based around R&D and trying to figure out at the same time the technical and aesthetic approaches to how we would be telling those key story beats.
We already we had like some major ideas what we want to show, and let the artist pretty much explore from the very beginning in Houdini, like how can we use the setups and see like how complex can we get with the setup and how much do we need to change it later in the post or whatever. So Philip started to create, like, we had scenes with the liquid, we had scenes with particles, and scenes with crystals. And so Philip could basically grab one of those major topics and create setups for us where we were able to use other application to do the composition. And he was able to create the final sim in Houdini for us.
Philip, maybe you could kind of take us through one of the shots and how you developed.
Yes, of course, I can share my screen, I guess. So let's start with the powder stand. The powder is one of the 3 stands we have on this project. The powder basically a simple pop grain setup inside pop network. The problem there was that we have to render this in 4K, but we don't have, basically I don't have resources to simulate like millions of grains. So I simulate around only 100,000 of particles, and then I use reshift instance attributes to replace each particles with 1,000 of small cubes, basically. And also each particles, of course, have attributes for Vitali. How I manage this growing expand effect is that I basically scatter some points on the ground, and then I scale them from 0 to 100%, and they push upwards already presented particles in the scene. And inside pop grain we have clamping, so it makes this wet sand looks, which is worked great. The second powder shots looks very complex, but it's very simple. Basically, we have a few different simulations. One is again pop grain simulation with clamping. The particles fall down from the big spheres and clamping together. Second part is small particles on the ground, which have forces to a few big nodes, I guess, and they're clamping there. And the final shot is, not final shot, but the final simulation is that I have a lot of small particles which is bounce around in a random way, basically. They look to the closest position on the surface and bounce where the normal bounce in the direction of the normal, basically. So they fall from the spheres and bounce on the ground. Also, I added some random noise to the simulation just to make all 3 simulations move in same direction. For the fluid simulation, I love to use smoke simulation. So it's basically a simple smoke simulation, and the particles which is advected by pop advect by volume node. For the fluid simulation, I use simple fluid with random initial forces, velocities, and animated viscosity. Basically, that's all. For the particles, I use same simulation as before, but only here I check if the particles inside the fluid, then the pop grain stop worked, and I applied just gravity to fall them down. For the crystal shots, where the big crystals grows, I use clip node to cut them, but they should clip in the steppy way. So I make this very clever, but in one way clever, in other way stupid way. How I achieve this? I scatter a lot of points inside pop network, and I made them move with this steppy motion. Then I then I take random points from this simulation and use clip SOP node inside for each loop to cut the parts of the crystal I don't need. And of course, it's all inside for each loops, bigger for each loops, where I randomize each parameter. And the final crystal shots, basically I use some infection algorithm, which is generate not random lines, and they all connected with the original points. So I have great edge transport node and generate kind of fall-off attributes. And using this fall-off, I can animate and offset, for example, p-scale or blend between different orient attributes to make them grow and rotate when they're growing. And also, as you can see, the viewport, I have a lot of custom attributes for, again, for Alembic and Vitaly to play with.
Thanks for taking us through that, Philip. That was very, very cool. Chris, do you want to talk about the process between the technical side, the production, and the creative, and working remotely across pipelines across the world?
Definitely. We're separated. On this project, we were spread out quite a bit between Vitaly in Germany and some of the other key team members, like Marius, for example, and then Philip all the way out in Moscow, and us in Toronto, all synchronized via Dropbox. So, Vitaly mentioned that one of the things that was incredibly helpful and useful in the way Philip was building scenes for us was that he would generate a set of sims and embed a lot of really useful attributes in them that we would then iterate and develop on. And Philip mentioned that breaking the scenes down into manageable chunks was something he knew would be critical. And this is from past experience as well, working remotely. We're not able to store or transfer terabytes worth of sim data over a Dropbox link and iterate on a daily basis. So relying on things like Redshift proxies and breaking sims down into manageable pieces that we could turn on and off at will made it possible to do this kind of level of work for a 4K finish remotely without getting too bogged down.
And at the same time working with a creative Houdini artist, which makes fun because like me saying like, hey, we need some details in geo, and the artist is thinking like, how can we add extra detail while using textures or while using different layers? And it's like a very creative way to work together and think about solutions on both sides, which makes it really a lot of fun actually.
Very cool. Well, we're all huge fans of Tendril over here, and so we really appreciate you guys sharing your work on this very cool project and your thoughts on working so effectively across the world. That's very cool. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Hello, it's Robert McGee here from SideFX, speaking with Varomix from MixTraining. Hey, Vero, how's it going?
Hey, Rob. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Excellent. Can you tell me a bit about yourself and your journey with Houdini?
Sure. How much time do we have? Okay, so I started my journey in exactly when you guys released the Apprentice Edition.
Oh.
That was my start in Houdini. I knew about Houdini a little bit, reading about it. There was use on X-Men, I think. And when you released the Apprentice Edition, I downloaded the both CDs. There was one CD with the application and one with tutorials, and I just did the tutorials, did the documentation, and started from there. I was already working in 3D, so started learning it, trying to get it into where I was working at, and didn't get it to, but kept on learning until I got a a job in a company actually in Canada, making stuff in Houdini precisely, not just with other applications. But then it went on from there, just working on different things, from TV ads to internet videos for visual effects, modeling, everything in Houdini. It's the only thing I use. It's my main tool all the time. And now I'm even doing procedural assets to train computer vision algorithms. So I've done a lot of things with it. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Along the way, you put together MixTraining. Tell me a bit about how your MixTraining company can help people learning Houdini and building Houdini skills.
Yeah, well, when I started learning, I took a lot of knowledge from other people. The internet was already there, slow, but you could get knowledge from other people that were sharing. So I wanted to share as well, give back in a way. So I started doing tutorials, and I also wanted to learn more English because I'm from Mexico, so I don't speak English natively. But I wanted to learn more English, and I forced myself to actually make tutorials in English so I could learn more. And that was actually a way that I actually learned a lot of English. Then I started doing more, and I started getting paid for tutorials as well. And I was like, okay, this could be something that I can do, not only teach, but also make some money of. And I started making more tutorials online. People like it. And since I learned by myself mostly, actually, everything I learned from Houdini is by myself. I got, I think, a really friendly method, because I think when I break things into simpler things, I get to understand how they work and stuff. And I like to make training or teaching really simple. I don't like to lecture people, or I want to be like a friend that is by your side teaching you something. That's my approach. And people like that, and I think it's something that it has worked pretty well. And then turn into, I guess, like a company, since later I started working more in freelancing, just doing jobs on the side. I started making MixTraining more of a serious endeavor. So I made it into a company, started making longer format courses, and it turned out pretty well. There's a big community actually around MixTraining that of students that are really pleased with what we teach. And I want to keep going. I want to keep teaching. I love teaching.
Well, that's excellent. You've actually put together some tutorials for us. Recently, you put out the third-party rendering with Solaris tutorial, and we've got you working on a bit of a sequel to that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the new Solaris context, it's really interesting because it's like a new way to look at the assets and lighting and all the stuff. We made the 3D third-party renderers, and now I'm working on one that it's all focused now more into the lighting tools, which is, I guess, the main focus of Solaris. So we're going to be looking into how do you approach lights, how to work with lights, because there are different things in Solaris about lights. They have different capabilities. It's something that is not exposed to the regular object context for lights. And it makes it really simple to place lights, to control highlights, to control stuff. Like other applications done this, but now we have that in Houdini as well, which is really nice. They makes it really simple, and there's other tools like for example, I'm really excited about the render gallery. It's really an awesome tool. I even kind of consider it kind of like a sub-scene kind of system inside Houdini, because you can just save snapshots of your scene, and then you can just recover them anytime. It's really nice for people that are exploring different looks for a shot or something like that. It's going to be really helpful for those kind of people. Yeah.
Now, in the Solaris, obviously a big component of that is the use of USD. So how do you find transitioning to USD and making it a part of your workflow? Do you think that works okay for artists, or is it only a tool for big studios?
I think it works pretty well. It does make you think a little bit different when you're starting. If you already know a little bit of Houdini, you can kind of get used to the new terms, because maybe a primitive is different. A primitive in Solaris, now there's some terms that you have to learn, but it's not really that difficult. It's just, you just have to think that it's a graph or an outline of nodes, and that's it. I mean, there's not really that. I didn't find it that much different from regular Houdini. You have to consider it like it's its own thing, I guess, to wrap your head around it, because it is based on all around USD, which is a whole system by itself. So, but I don't think it's really that difficult to understand for artists.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate all your contributions to the community to help build up skills and help make more Houdini artists out there. And thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you. And I have to say thank you to you and all the companies, SideFX, because you guys have helped me a lot as well in whatever I've been doing in training. You guys have been really supportive in every single question or every single part that I've done. Promoting the material, whatever. Thank you, because I'm really grateful for SideFX to all the support that you guys give us as well.
Well, we love working with the community when good content's getting out there. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Chris from SideFX, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about a workshop we're hosting in conjunction with the GameDev HIVE on July 7th and 8th. On the 7th, we'll have a series of production presentations by game artists, and on the 8th, we'll be doing this workshop, which we'll be talking about now, which will be Houdini Digital Assets for game dev. Over the last few years, we've seen more and more use of Houdini in game dev with studios like Ubisoft and Remedy Entertainment and Insomniac, all kinds of studios doing incredible work with Houdini in their major games and indie games. And so we wanted to do a workshop, all education on how to create Houdini digital assets, HDAs, how to use them, and how to optimize a pipeline for procedural assets. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Rob, who's going to be the first presenter in the workshop, and he'll take us through his segment.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to do a sort of getting started with Houdini Engine for UE4, which will allow somebody new to the Houdini experience the chance to understand what is a Houdini digital asset, what is the UE4 plugin, how can you interconnect these things together to create a good experience for your level designers, for your game artists, and allow them to achieve things in their game editor with Houdini working under the hood, processing things procedurally. So there's a lot of ideas and concepts that need to be introduced, and this will be a great chance for people to get started and learn how this works.
Next up in the schedule is Simon.
Thanks, Chris. So in my segment, I want to break down a cemetery scene we built as demo around this project. So I want to go inside this network, talk a bit about how it's created, but also more importantly, how to actually bring this into a game engine. So if you're already a Houdini user who is a bit familiar with Houdini, this might be really valuable to you to learn more about what it takes to set up like a terrain or instancing to make sure it works nicely in a game engine and generate content in a game editor like Unreal with the plugin available.
And finally on the schedule, we have Erwin.
Hi. So in my workshop, we're going to be talking about user-friendly production tools for procedural pipelines. So we'll be talking about this topic, and then after that, we're going to build a cache-based path editor that takes Simon's Graveyard, and then we can create a little editor that allows us to use curves, a pathfinder, and a handful of buttons to easily add and remove path segments to this little world. And then after that, we'll be focusing on how we can take a Python viewer state tool and edit objects from a cache. This is going to be more about how to integrate Python viewer states with the nodes to create a functional editor. This is a bit more advanced, so we won't be diving fully in Python here, but it will still be very interesting if you're interested in using Python viewer states for your tools. And hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to create your own custom viewer states.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. So the structure of the day is that at the beginning, it's the most basic. In fact, you don't even have to be a Houdini artist to join us at the very beginning. And then as the day progresses, it'll get more complex. So it's on July 8th, and we hope you can join us that day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Simon. I've been with SideFX. I make tutorials and focus on making things for games. So here I'm joined with an awesome Houdini artist, Junichiro. So welcome, and also introduce yourself a bit.
Hello, this is Junichiro Horikawa, and I am a algorithmic designer working in Japan and been using Houdini for around 3 to 4 years now, using the tool to do some geometric modeling for architectural and product design purposes.
Awesome. So let's get started with some questions. So I mainly want to first ask you things about like the beginning of your Houdini adventure. So like you said, like you're using some of like more algorithmic designs and approaches in Houdini. So when you started learning Houdini, was this immediately like jumping into wrangles and VEX, or did you learn something more basic, or maybe did you first start Houdini using for simulation? Where was your starting point that you looked into?
Well, I was previously using other softwares for procedural design, procedural modeling, and I heard that Houdini is really good at it, especially when it comes to dealing with the meshes. So I wanted to try the modeling part of this Houdini, and I've started by using the expressions in Houdini. Then turns out I found out that using wrangles or vexes is really a good idea to do what I really wanted to do in terms of the algorithmic designs. So came from modeling, and recently I'm creating animations as well.
Awesome. So you mentioned you had some other experiences with other software. Like, were there any like certain knowledge or maybe certain websites or certain series on YouTube that were super helpful for you to get sort of like the specific thing you wanted to do?
Well, I was in the architectural field, so the main tool that I was using is a CAD-based tool, and specifically I was using like Rhinoceros and Grasshopper for procedural design purposes, which is another node-based visual programming tools to deal with nerves-based geometries. But it does have some like limitations in terms of creating complex geometries, especially based on like meshes. So I wanted to create some more like dynamic, complex architectural geometry using those meshes. So that's kind of why I started using Houdini and started watching some tutorials on YouTube and all the other places.
Yeah, it's great to see that you like had like a CAD program and suddenly like jumped into Houdini, which is sort of like a bit different area and different approaches there. So what does Houdini, I would say, personally mean to you, or where do you think it's like a strength to your workflow, or what strength does it give you to create something or have the freedom to create something?
The things I really like about Houdini is that you can create your own like solver for yourself, and especially if you know how to code a little, then you could almost create any kind of simulation by yourself. And I think that's the greatest things about Houdini. It just has all the tool set to do what you really want in terms of creating simulations. And I'm not really a VFX person or anything, but I am interested in kind of simulations of natures, how nature grow, nature like evolute, the evolution of the natures, and I really wanted to like mimic those processes using computational tools, and I found that using Houdini is the easiest way to implement those stuffs myself, comparing to other softwares that I've been using previously.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also want to talk with you about your YouTube channel. So you have been making a lot of like interesting and good content on your YouTube channel, tutorials, like you do like this weekly live stream, which is, I think, super cool.
Thank you.
So definitely everyone who's watching, definitely check out his YouTube channel, his weekly live stream. Definitely worth having a look at it. So I was also wondering, like, you have been doing this like weekly live stream for a while now. So how do you come up with like different ideas and inspirations? Like, I mean, they're sometimes just so different in variation. Like sometimes it's like you said, like sometimes you play around with geometry, and then sometimes you're also interested in doing something like more simulating, like a smoke. So tell us a bit more about it.
Well, if I would categorize what I've made during those sessions, I might say it's kind of related to I'm kind of looking into how I can output as a physical geometry, a physical output. So I'm kind of trying to avoid something that is only available in computer graphics, but I'm trying to create something which could be like outputted as a physical geometry by, I don't know, maybe 3D printing or laser cutting or something like that. And all those ideas I came up with, I mean, basically, these are a bunch of ideas that I grabbed from the internet, like from Pinterest or anything. When I found, at that time, when I found that interesting, something could be a shape of the nature, could be a process, how mechanics works. It could be some like the hacking way to deal with the volume. And all those stuff and when I found something interesting, then I really wanted to make it recorded so that I can look it back myself to refer myself for could be a reference for my future job or anything, or just look around and play, see how what I could do as a tool set in terms of the geometry. So it's kind of my self-study like sessions, and I'm kind of forcing other people to come join to see how they think about it.
Great. Now, the last thing that I want to ask you is about Unreal 5 as well. So I noticed that you've also been playing around with it, and you made a small video about it, about using the texture, saving attributes and textures and using that. So what is your opinion, or how do you look at using something with Unreal 5 and using Houdini? Like, do you see this like as certain interest for the future, or do you have any plans on playing around with it more?
Well, when Unreal 5 and Unreal Engine 5 came out like a few weeks ago, I was pretty excited, like everybody else, especially with the new global illumination lumen system, and also a nanite. And I thought both could be really useful for Houdini geometry, the geometry made from Houdini, especially when you use for a nanite, if you use like PDB or SDF stuff and convert it into a polygon, that will just create a massive amount of points, which is kind of too heavy to deal with inside game engines, the real-time environment. But with these techniques, with these nanite system, could be it is possible to bring all those massive amounts of points or whatever you build up using a volume So I thought the connection between Unreal Engine 5 and Houdini is a great one. And also, I was also wanted to try this Lumen global illumination, which I made a little video about it in order to bring the animation that I made in Houdini to Unreal 5 by preserving all the custom attributes attached to each of the point on the geometry. I really wanted to do that because since Houdini is, I think, is best at dealing. The best concept of Houdini is having this attribute as a metadata for each point or primitive or vertices. And I really love that this idea of having attributes which you can use for any purposes inside Houdini. But the kind of the limitation is that it's a bit hard to bring those information outside this Houdini. But I really wanted to use this information inside like Unreal 5 together with the Lumen so that I can use these attributes information with the shader inside in Unreal Engine 5 so that I can do a bit more advanced or more complex or more cool visualizations in real time using Lumen. So that's kind of a reason I made this kind of process, or I did this kind of experiments. Specifically saying I was using Alembic together with the technique of VAT, the vertex animation textures, combining them together to bring all those textures, bring all those attributes as a textures together with the geometry as an Alembic, and combine it all together inside Unreal Engine 5 to play it all together. And it seems to work just fine in my environment. And it's just a experiment for just my own experiment. Just wanted to try out those attribute-driven renderings inside Unreal, which has this real-time global illumination, the coolest global illumination system ever. So, yeah, so that's kind of reason.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going to really be exciting times with all these new tech coming out. But yeah, here that's it for our small interview talk. So thank you, Junichiro, for joining us here. And I'm definitely looking forward to what you will be making in the future.
Thank you.
And to everyone, bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. Here's Fiona from Marketing at SideFX. Today, I have a guest with me who has the title of Employee Number 1. He is the author of not only one, but maybe 1.5 rendering engines. And he also likes to drink soda at room temperature. It's a Pepsi that is room temperature, deflated, and in a 2-liter bottle, and he uses Vim. So who can this guy be? This is none other than Mark Elendt, which the last name I still mess up to pronounce today. So everyone, a warm welcome, everyone. You and me here and the audience. Everyone, welcome Mark. If you could please tell us how to pronounce your name so that when we discuss the use of the Elendt kernel, we can say it properly. So welcome, Mark.
Hi, Fiona. Thank you for that nice introduction. A warm welcome, just like my Pepsi. So there's actually a little story behind the last name. So all my life, I actually mispronounced my last name. And it was only when I spoke to my parents and my father, who corrected me on how to pronounce my last name, that I found out that it's pronounced Elendt. So I'm very, very lenient with however anyone wants to pronounce my last name.
So Mark, I remember the first time I met you at a VS gathering in Toronto. And you told me you started off with, I don't remember, but like the memorable thing was I was employee number 1, and I think it took like a few seconds to register what that actually meant, and I was like, "Holy shit, you're the first employee!" and you were like, "Yeah, like super modest." Yes.
So what it really means is that I'm old because it's been around for over 30 years, and so that makes me old. I started SideFX when it was just Kim and Greg, and actually my very first day at SideFX, I was sitting in a spare bedroom in Kim Davidson's house while Kim and Greg were at SIGGRAPH in Boston. And I just was
they were
sitting
getting
there.
drunk without you. How did they find you? Like just on the street? Like.
So I was before I started at SideFX, I was right out of university. I went to work at an insurance company and writing software for an insurance company. And in my spare time, I was writing ray tracers on an Amiga. And then I ported it to the IBM PC, the Intel 386 processor. It was old school. And so I took some pictures of my renderings on an old SLR camera and sent them off to Kim and Greg. And for some reason, they actually hired me, which was crazy.
How did you find them actually? Like how did you know about them?
So that's probably a story. Well, so my dad was in advertising, and they had actually used SideFX production, which was before. This is going way back in history. So before SideFX software, there was SideFX production, which was Kim and Greg had the software company, and they were paired up with the production company. My dad's used SideFX production for a commercial, and so they actually knew the guys when and so I made the connection that way. It was very, so I didn't actually go and work for SideFX at that point. I still had my nice, stable, secure job as an insurance programmer. But I really started hating that job. And so there was an ad for a developer at Alias in their rendering team. They were looking for a rendering team at Alias. And so I called up Kim to see if he would give me a letter of reference for Alias for my job.
Wow.
And at the point, he actually said, "Hey, you know what? We're thinking of splitting off the software company from the production company. Why don't you come work for us instead?" And I haven't looked back since then.
So basically, there was the possibility that Mantra didn't happen under you. By the way, if anyone was wondering, Mark wrote Mantra. So Mantra possibly wouldn't have happened if you had applied, if you didn't need a letter of recommendation. Wow.
This was the early 90s or the late 80s, right? So there were only a handful of computer graphics companies, and I just happened to be in the great spot where Alias was in Toronto and SideFX was in Toronto. There was Sheridan. There was a lot of buzz around computer graphics in the Toronto area, and I just happened to be here at the time. So again, very lucky.
Then when you started with Kim and Greg, like, I can't imagine that they just said, "Well, we need a renderer, like go write one," or is that actually what happened, or what?
So when I started, they had a software renderer, offline renderer called Crystal, which was written by a guy named Dave Gordon who worked at Omnibus Japan, and really smart guy. I don't know if he's still in the industry, but he was a really smart guy. And he wrote a scanline renderer. And I'd always played with ray tracers. And so I thought that writing a ray tracer might be a good way to well, it would be an interesting addition to the Prism software.
Smells kind of familiar, like Karma today.
Well, Karma's a ray tracer just like Mantra. So
Yeah.
well, not quite just like Mantra, but same technology, kind of.
So you wrote Mantra for Prisms, and then ported it to Houdini.
For Houdini, it was actually a rewrite of the original renderer. So the original Mantra renderer used the Prisms libraries, which were all written in C. And for Houdini, we were moving to C++. This was back in 1992, which was the early days for C++. And so we were writing everything sort of from the ground up, and it was an opportunity to rewrite the renderer using a lot of the techniques, the production techniques that had come through from people using Mantra in Prisms, and take those ideas and move them over to Houdini in C++.
And you were getting, like, was Kim and Greg still working on their studio at the time, or that was already done?
No. So when I started with SideFX full time, that was when Kim and Greg devoted all their efforts to software instead of production. So they didn't do any production after I joined. So as employee number one, it was employee number one of the software company. So, okay. but both Kim and Greg, having come from a production background, they were steeped in production, and you can still see that today. You know, Kim is a founding member of the Toronto VES section. He's still so involved in the industry. He's passionate about it, and it really shows. But it comes from the fact that he actually had experience sitting behind the monitor and punching, using the mouse to generate pixels.
Were you the only one working on Mantra for a significant number of years, or like other people came on, obviously, right? Like you weren't working in the basement anymore, or?
So SideFX stayed with a relatively small number of developers but most of the developers were working on Prisms, the animation package, or modeling. When we started developing Houdini, most of the team was involved in UI design and our new geometry libraries. But even that was me, right? Because with this very small team, you have to wear a lot of hats. So aside from doing rendering, I was also working on the geometry. I was working on animation tools, the SOP interface. So all of that had to be built from the ground up. And it was a very small, very exciting time in the software development.
I have a question about the step in development that we took to get into LOPS and Solaris and supporting USD. It allows us to work with other rendering engines, which we already did in the past, but now it's, I guess, a little bit more different, and we kind of work more closely together with like RenderMan, 3Delight, Arnold. I'm missing Redshift. V-Ray.
V-Ray, yes. There are other Hydra delegates out there that will fit into Solaris. So USD and Hydra are sort of this big leveling field for renderers, because every renderer can write a standard interface that gets plugged in and can be used by any USD application, which is great. Which is great because it gives a lot of choice to users. You can target real-time rendering with engines like Storm, or you can target offline rendering with engines like a lot that you just mentioned right there. When we started looking at developing lighting packages, we actually considered rolling our own lighting package and our own lighting tools, and we realized that USD was probably the way to go because it had so much support behind it and so much momentum and was production tested already. So we went down that road, and with Hydra, it was to me, it was a little bit of an extra bonus that we get to work natively with the other renderers. We have it's not very competitive with the other renderers. I know many of the other render developers personally, and I've shared. But
wait, I missed that. Could you say that again?
I've had drinks with the other render developers. Yes.
Yes.
They're a good,
I was
interesting,
there for some of them.
Well, for some of them, they're a lot of really smart guys working in the rendering field, and it's a very small field of people working on renders. So you get to know the other people, a lot of the other people.
Yeah, this is cool. I was wondering kind of about the collaboration component of what developing Solaris is kind of allowing SideFX to kind of to work with a larger group of external people in a non-hostile way, if I could say. Yeah.
Well, it actually goes both ways, because Autodesk has done some great work developing the Autodesk standard surface model, right? And that is shared with the community, just like USD is shared with the community. So being able to leverage off all that research and user interface design for the Autodesk standard surface, it really helps the industry as a whole. So anything that helps the artists out there make pixels is a good thing.
Agreed. So then, where do you see the future of rendering going? And like with the game engines kind of all converging?
Yeah, so I think, for many years people said that rendering was a sort of dead science because everybody knew how to do everything. But I think that there's been a resurgence, a renaissance of rendering, and we're seeing a lot of how the two sort of technologies are coming together. You've got the real-time engines who have to aim for 60 frames a second, compared to the offline rendering, which is hours a frame. And people want the offline rendering to be as fast or faster, and they also want the real-time engines. They want to leverage some of that fantastic technology, even if it takes 10 seconds a frame, that all of a sudden turns into a very fast offline renderer. And so you've got, the real-time engines are getting ray tracing abilities. I think every offline renderer that I know of has at least some GPU component. So we're leveraging off the same technologies because the GPU is such a powerhouse in there for rendering. You've got to take advantage of it. And so I think that a lot of while the two technologies are getting closer and closer, they still have different goals and they still have different implementations. So while they're getting closer, I still think the kind of rendering is still a long way off. But I think that as they get artists will be able to be more flexible and choose which kind of rendering technologies they want to use.
Well, thank you very much for your storytelling, insight, and I don't know, like a guess into the future. It's certainly like has some meaning because you're in this industry for a long time, even though you laugh about being a dinosaur. I am
a dinosaur.
No, Jeff Lade is a dinosaur. He was a T-Rex that we featured last time. No, it's valuable like perspective to hear about. So thank you for sharing all the things with us, and well, that's it for now.
Well, thank you very much, Fiona, for the opportunity to let me ramble like I do.
Anytime.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Debra Isaac. I'm a Houdini educator at Drexel University and also the founder of Houdini School. Today we're with Teinye Horsfall. He's a 3D architect and concept designer. Hi, Teinye.
Hi, Debra. How are you doing?
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a 3D architect and concept designer. I come from an architectural background, and I've been working in the architectural design and build industry for about 20 years. I've also been dabbling in all different types of software, and for computer games like Houdini, obviously, and Unreal, and 3ds Max, and the rest of them. I also am a 3D content provider. I sell 3D content via lots of 3D marketplaces online, and that's me. That's what I do.
That's great. I wanted to hear a little bit about your inspiration. I see a lot of historical and futuristic influences in your work.
Yeah, I've always been inspired by sci-fi movies, obviously. Back to the Future, Star Wars, and the rest of them. I always thought, when the first time I actually watched Back to the Future, I started thinking, like, we can actually try to predict what buildings would look like in the future. And I was very young at the time, but ever since I started watching sci-fi movies, I've been intrigued by architecture, the architecture within the movies. And I've always loved buildings. The reason I actually studied architecture was because I wanted to draw, or I wanted to create buildings. But I mostly do a lot of design visualizations for architecture and interior design, and sometimes computer games.
I've been admiring your futuristic Skyscraper Generator. It has a really sleek and mysterious quality to it. Where did you get the idea for that?
I've always built skyscrapers. Ever since I started creating 3D models, I've been building skyscrapers for personal projects as well as professional projects. And I always had difficulty sometimes creating the kind of shape that I wanted to create. And when I discovered Houdini and did some research, did some tutorials on it, I realized that it has so much power and I can do so much more. So I just decided to create stuff within Houdini. And during the processes, I started to realize you could generate complex shapes using very simple algorithms. And so I started to dabble into those, and I just kept going from there. And whatever I learned how to do something new, I tried to apply it to the projects that I was working with within Houdini. And that's just how I kept building until I started to create interesting shapes that actually looked realistic and futuristic at the same time. So
you don't see a lot of Houdini in architecture in the industry. Do you see that changing in the future?
Well, yes, I do. Houdini is probably the most powerful procedural tool in the industry at the moment. And I was actually shocked that most people didn't use it in architecture, because I actually started using Houdini about 1.5 years ago. But there are parametric tools that are used in other applications, but Houdini is so much more intuitive, and it might seem scary if you don't know anything about it, but once you learn how it works, it's just the most powerful tool. I sometimes feel like Tony Stark when I'm working with Houdini. It's like, I can literally kind of communicate, not verbally, but communicate with the computer, and together we can create something amazing. And that's, I think, the whole point of it. For architectural visualization, Houdini is the tool for me, and I have actually convinced a lot of other people to start using it, and they've been like, "Where's this thing been? It's been around for a while, but we just never saw it." So I'm thinking that's probably the reason. But yeah, the industry is definitely going to go in that direction, because I already see a lot of other popular applications copying Houdini's style of creating three-dimensional, non-destructive procedural models. So yeah, it is going to catch on eventually.
I love that. My last question is, what interests you the most about the future of design?
The future of design. Well, I've always, like I said, I'm a sci-fi fan, and I've watched movies like The Matrix, where the computers were doing everything. Might have seemed scary within the movie, but in realism, it is going to happen. We're now 3D printing. We're at initial stages, but it makes sense for designing buildings using artificial intelligence to create interesting shapes that you would not be able to come up with on your own. It just makes so much sense, and I actually think everyone's going to go in that direction eventually.
That's so interesting. And thank you for joining us, Teinye. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks, Debra. It's good speaking to you too.